Thank you very much. Hopefully my mic turns on. There we go. Perfect. And I will go ahead to the first round of slides. So first of all, fantastic to see everybody live. Second of all, I am not brave enough to sing. I was quite satisfied that I put pants on. I remembered to do that. The pants actually matched the jacket, and it all actually fit. So those were my accomplishments for the day. So I'm not going to press my luck by trying to sing to you in this environment. As Richard mentioned, I am the CEO and co-founder of Theta Lake. We do security and compliance for modern collaboration platforms. So for all of the logos you see on that slide, we have active partnerships. We provide integration that allows you to do everything from archive integration, compliance archiving, all the way through to using actual real machine learning, natural language understanding to detect risks inside of those communications. But I will come back to how we do that and some of the things we do in just a second. And I'm going to talk about how collaboration tools have affected our workplace and what the collaboration-first workplace looks like. So I think you've probably seen some of the gaffes, right? This is one where the person decided that they were going to tease their team and they turned themselves into a potato, and then they could not change themselves from a potato for the entirety of the call. And somebody nicely took a screenshot of that with their camera and then posted that out on social media. So quite a fun one. I think maybe some of you are familiar with this. This is one where a doctor went for his court appearance to dispute a ticket while he was doing surgery. So this is actually a real Zoom meeting that happened. You can imagine this was intentionally recorded by the court, but they suspended the hearing and asked him to come back at another time, right? So these are examples of how people have tried to adapt to this hybrid environment. And then I think probably everybody's familiar with the cat, right? The cat is one where, and to this day, I happen to know Eric, and Eric still refutes and maintains that there is no ability to create a cat persona for yourself inside of Zoom. So this was some sort of user error that left the lawyer in this particular court hearing a cat or a kitten for the entirety of that. So these are all the fun things that happen in that environment, but I am pretty sure everybody in this room can relate to, maybe not the underwear story, although probably some in here have gone to a meeting in their underwear at home on a Zoom, but you can probably relate to accidentally sharing the wrong screen and starting to show the wrong things as you're talking to somebody and doing the, can you see my screen? Do you see my presentation? And then having somebody correct you and say, no, I don't see that. I see a spreadsheet, or I see another application open. I see things that could potentially be a risk to the organization. And that is what has started to happen. And I'll address some of the things the panel actually talked about, because as of this week, there are 3 regulators who have jumped in around concept of hybrid work and the use of tools and hybrid work for communication. And it follows a pretty logical path. So the first thing to think about here is, as those laughs and the humorous moments shift to the liabilities and the realities that happen in these communications, you have to start to think about a couple things. So first and foremost, I think the default reaction that everybody tries to hold to is, hey, maybe this is a misappropriation of the Zen concept, but if it's not recorded, did it really happen? Is it really a big deal? And what you need to realize is that anybody and any participant in one of those meetings can take a screenshot, can take a picture with their camera. There are literally, if you Google it, hundreds of techniques and tools to record the content inside of a meeting, even if it's not the built-in recording feature of the application itself. Whether it's for productivity reasons, you want the notes after, you want to be able to mine the data, whether you just want to take something out of there for context or for laughs, like the boss becoming a potato in that scenario. There is quite literally no such thing as an off-the-record conversation on chat or on video. So if you're assuming that you're safe because your organization is not recording it, very, very far from the truth, and you're starting to see that next wave of incidents happening. So this was a sub-firm of LPL, right? Obviously a large RIA manager in the US, and the president of that group actually made some racist comments that were captured by somebody else in the meeting, not officially recorded, and then shared out publicly, and then that firm was terminated from LPL, and that person was terminated from LPL for doing those things. So bad indications of conduct in that environment. In terms of what the regulators are starting to look at, they were pretty transparent, saying, hey, we understand everybody has to scramble to keep information flowing and keep the business running, and we expect you to come back at some point to standards and common sense around how you're monitoring communications. So they put that out there last year, and now what you're starting to see is they're looking at what's happening in these communications, in these forums. They're getting notifications, right? This is another example where I'm sure the host of that webcast did not pro-offer the data to that regulator, but somebody captured that data and provided it to the regulator, and now they're actually taking a look at the market manipulation in that particular scenario. So you're seeing these things happen, and what it flows into should be a pretty predictable thing for everybody. So the predictable path to regulatory requirements is here, right? It's not something that was, hey, maybe someday regulators are going to be paying attention to these collaboration tools and what's happening on them, and then we'll take them seriously. The reality is, if you look over the last several months and as recently as this week, whether it's very nuanced versions like what FINRA produced this week, where they give very specific use cases and scenarios, or whether you look at ESMA, which gives a very nice overview, and you can spend time reading this or look at the slides after. Theirs is perhaps my favorite, which is basically saying, don't be daft. We're going to be looking at these things, and we're not going to tell you each and every single feature that sits underneath one of these platforms. If it's video conferencing, if it's texting capabilities, you should be applying common sense supervision, archiving, and compliance, and you should actually be dealing with that. And we're not going to waste our time trying to detail all of the different innovation and technologies there. We expect you to use common sense in this environment. That, as was referenced on the panel, the FCA also came out with statements on this front around hybrid work, so we're seeing those actually happen. And then as of Tuesday, the SEC announced that they are doing sweeps in the US of Wall Street banks around hybrid working and digital communications, right? So they have active investigations going. Ultimately, everybody knew and everybody knows that people were using Zoom and Teams and WhatsApp and WeChat and all of the different communication tools over the last year to keep going and to keep their businesses moving. And the expectation was at some point, architectures would be formalized and compliance would follow the logical flow of capturing those communications and supervising that. Regulators are not going to lead on that front. They are going to watch the behavior of all those organizations. And so they are now saying, hey, we told you that we were going to be paying attention to this, and now we're asking you to tell us what you're doing, and we are going to be proactively examining that. And to be an organization that is not coming to them with a plan and does not have an answer to these things is a very risky place to be. And I'll talk about another reason why, which is many organizations have been proactive over the last little bit, right? So this is something that's near and dear to our heart. This is what Theta Lake is used for, is to actually capture video communications, chat communications, things that maybe your traditional email archive or your traditional voice recording infrastructure have not been able to do, to be able to actually analyze what's being shown on a screen in a screen share, whether it's a document share, whether it's an app share, whether it's an in-app whiteboarding, or whether it's a document being held up on screen, and being able to detect things inside of that. And it's actually being used at large scale in organizations who are interacting with those same regulators. So those things have a very tight symbiosis, right? So in these scenarios, knowing that it is actually being used in those global environments, knowing that folks are shaping the regulatory expectation and perspective, in some ways can be good because there are blueprints out there and potentially regulators are going to provide those blueprints for you that you can actually follow. In some ways it's bad because you're going to be the one potentially that comes to that conversation where they're asking you why you do not have a similar program. What is your program going to look like, or prescriptively tell you that you need to do things that you were not prepared to do because somebody else set the table stakes for that, right? Set the directions for that. So really important things to think about here. I'll leave you with a couple notes on here. First and foremost, I think the traditional responses usually say no, we're going to turn things off and we're going to try and control if people can do whiteboarding or if they can do polling inside of a meeting or they can turn on chat. Ultimately, that doesn't win. The business wins in this scenario, and the business wins not because the end users of the organization want those features. It's because the customers and the people they interact with demand those features. And in a world where we're going to continue to be more and more hybrid and deal with remote scenarios where Those platforms, Zoom, Teams, et cetera, have proven themselves to be a great way to communicate and collaborate, especially with customers and clients and partners. They will continue to be used. And so trying to say no to them just means you're creating a resistance path that will funnel people outside of your compliance flow. And you want to keep people inside of that compliance flow. So think about it from that perspective and understand that it will be used and will be adopted in that environment. And then the other thing to think about here is that this is happening all over the globe, right? If you look at some of the names on that list, these are North American companies, these are European companies, these are UK companies that are dealing with requests from the FCA, from FINRA, responding to SEC, responding to IROC in these scenarios. So definitely something to keep in mind on that front. And then I will just quickly talk a little bit about what we do at Theta Lake and how some of these things manifest. So I mentioned previously integrations with a lot of the logos on that screen. That is something that we worked quite hard in partnership with platforms like Zoom and Microsoft and Slack and RingCentral and Cisco with Webex platforms and on and on. And the goal in these scenarios was to be frictionless, right? A lot of the challenge of onboarding new tools to do capture and to do supervision is the very deployment of them, right? So thinking about how am I going to get this on devices? How am I going to change my network to be able to capture those things? And that's something we've solved by creating API-based integrations. So no disruption, no need to touch a device, no need to deal with things around VDI, no need to deal with things around deployments in the network. Very easy and simple to turn on, and very easy and simple to solve the base use cases, which is first, don't disrupt your existing compliance flow, don't disrupt your existing supervision or archive systems. Just figure out a way to get the core e-coms out of those platforms into your existing archive, and do that at scale and do that very quickly so you can satisfy end user demand. For example, being able to turn on in-meeting chat and polling and those types of functionalities in Zoom, or turning on chat inside of Webex and being able to effectively just capture that. Maybe you're not quite ready to do a full recording program of the audio or video, but maybe you are ready to actually turn on chat and capture those traditional e-coms and send them to your existing email archive. So those are things that we can do in those frictionless integrations that we have. The next thing that I think is very, very important is actually being able to deal with those different modalities. Trying to deal with an audio transcript or just the audio recording in an environment where things can be shown and shared very easily means that you're missing a tremendous amount of context and potentially a tremendous amount of the e-coms inside of those communications. So one of the things that we are a pioneer in is the ability to actually not only capture the visual content and archive that and allow you to scroll through that, but actually detect risks inside of that, whether those risks are things shown on camera, whether they are shared in the screen share, whether they appear as something that's inside of an app that's shown on that, or whether it's in the whiteboarding capabilities inside of those collaboration platforms. So being able to have detections that give you an ability to understand potential risk inside of a video meeting is a pretty critical component. We may or may not detect whether or not somebody came to the meeting with underwear and no pants, those types of things, but we certainly can tell you and identify semantic relatedness of a document that is shown that looks like a prospectus on screen. And those are the types of things that our AI and our natural language processing and the machine learning infrastructure are designed to help you detect in that environment, whether it's literally a document held up on camera or whether it's a screen share that happens inside of that meeting. Third pillar underneath that, talking about those risk identifications, is using them to better route that content. So I think one of the big concerns that we usually help address with the customers that we work with is that's a lot of communications, and they tend to be long, and there tends to be a lot of different modes that I need to look at, right? Think about the fact that if you had an hour Zoom meeting or even a 20-minute Zoom meeting, it would probably take you about twice that amount of time, if not more, to review it, because you have to start and stop it and look at those different things inside of it. Well, the ability to leverage those risk detections and risk scoring to better prioritize the content you look at and better route things that are of interest based on the demographics or the integration type, right? If it's with customers and regulated users, then that goes to a different work queue. If it's got actual risk detected in it, that goes into a proactive review queue. If it's something that is green and is personal, maybe it doesn't even stay in the archive. Maybe you keep it temporarily for 30 days and expunge it because it's not relevant to your compliance team. Those are all ways that the machine learning and the workflow engines can help seamlessly triage that data so you're not overloading your compliance infrastructure. And you're adhering to the concept and the premise of maintaining good supervision over that, and you can actually do proper record keeping. And the last piece underneath that, and I mentioned it before, is being able to leverage the system as an archive of record with full attestations for 17A4 if you want to do that for worm compliance, being able to leverage the infrastructure to compliantly archive e-coms, compliantly archive video content, et cetera, as well as integrate with the existing archive infrastructure that you likely have, whether that's production integrations with Veritas, with Global Relay, with Smarsh, with Proofpoint, where they may not have coverage for those channels or those modalities, but you have processes and legacy built around that. So how do you bridge that gap? That is something we spend a tremendous amount of time doing as well. So I will just close with happy to show you more about this. Please come by the booth and request a demo, or if you don't have time to do that today, please visit our website. Take a look at everything that's on there, and happy to talk to you a little bit more and answer a question or two. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, we're running a little bit late today, so yeah. Appreciate everybody being here, and it's nice to see everybody. Happy to answer a question, yeah?
Yeah, I'll pop one out then.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything with Cora?
Cora.
Cora is an integration for video conferences that automatically records it and does sentiment analysis and enables you to kind of track. It's like a sales optimization tool. I wonder whether that was one that you'd come across.
Yeah, those are there's kind of a countless list of trying to collect the data and harness the data that happens inside of meetings. So we see solutions like that. We see Chorus AI as another one, Gong.io, which are used oftentimes in sales scenarios. We look at those as kind of complementary solutions that help folks gain sentiment out of it, but don't necessarily kind of pinpoint those risk scenarios or satisfy the archiving obligation. But in some ways they drive more of that need to know, right?
Yeah.
You do not want to be in the scenario where a business group has turned on one of those things for a business purpose of collecting the data, and then you don't realize that you have the data, and then you have to treat that data as sensitive and potentially private and discoverable and all those things as well. So, yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.